I'm Jack, and yeah, I've tried to make a career in the Army, and then after 23 years decided to go somewhere else. Went to Bristol Myers Squibb and J&J, and there was a lot of fun. I mean, so part of what I enjoyed in leaving the Army was casting a very wide net, and I hope that you guys all, sorry if I say guys, it's the Army coming back, but if you all cast a very wide net. So I went to 10 different industry / types of positions. I had 2 academic, 1 with RAND, 1 with GM, 1 with Bristol Myers Squibb, 1 with a consulting firm for the government, 1 with another type of consulting firm. So all over the place, because they all need good analytics, good skills, good decision analysis, simulation, optimization, and it's just where do you want to fit in. And I actually built a multiple criteria decision model for me that my wife and I would work on after we interviewed each one of these companies. It was actually pretty interesting. It's the first time I saw my wife really get into my work, because it really affected the family. You know, where we're going to live, what are the schools like, am I going to do something interesting, am I going to be working with people I can actually go to work and face every day, will I use what I'm good at, will I learn new things. I made a list of the things that were important to me about the job. You know, how much am I going to make? Yeah, that was there too. But the interesting thing was, after we did our 9th interview, we had 9 offers, and we went through them all, and we're all set to call one of them back and say, hey, we're going for you. And then I got a call from Bristol Myers Squibb, and I said, well, you know, I'm just about ready to decide, well, why don't we do a telephone interview? So then, and then I got an offer to go and visit them. So visiting, we came back, and my wife's asking me all these questions from our multiple criteria list about, all right, what are the schools like, you know, what's the cost of housing there, is it close to this and that, and we ended up and we said, all right, we know that if Bristol Myers Squibb comes over this amount with their offer, we know all the rest of the stuff about it, that we'll take it, and if they don't, then we're going to take this one over here. It's pretty cool, and sure enough, they beat that offer, and then and we ended up going to Bristol Myers Squibb. But it was kind of a real fun thing to use what I was teaching. I taught grad school before the last 6 years in the Army. So it was a good thing to do, I thought, to really cast a wide net and then actually specify with you and your significant others what you're really looking for. And then, you know, be able to choose between them. So I recommend you do something like that. Now we're actually, it was described that we're working with life sciences, and it's true. We work with medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and with agriculture. And we do portfolio management, decision analysis, optimization, modeling of operations, whatever you need to use the analytics to actually add value to the company. And I'll say exactly what Warren said, or agree with him, that a lot of the times you're not going to be working on PhD work, right? However, you will get into some really cool stuff, which could be PhD work, as you move on, because you're taking these real world things that haven't been addressed by folks back in the school. Okay, and so a lot of the times you're going to be working on, you know, undergrad difficulty type things. But the hard part is, and I teach there's 5 of us that teach a soft skills course the day before the analytics conference, the Informed Analytics Conference over the last 5-6 years. It's called Soft Skills. If you get a chance, I would recommend taking that and mixing it up with the people in that course. It's only, I think we only allow 40 people to sign up. It's like $25 or something. It's real cheap. And it's all day. And we just, we have war stories from businesses. And then we just go through the framing of a problem, the working with the decision makers. How do you display the results? How do you recognize when there's bias in the room? How do you know when good data is good enough? I mean, all kinds of stuff that's kind of soft skills. So I really recommend that no matter where you're going to go. Soft skills are, and I'll ask the other 2 panelists, are critical. And you will get either accepted or basically thrown out of the room, in a nice way, but thrown out depending on your soft skills. I'll leave it at that.
Added that everyone in this room is going to come into an initial job interview with very similar classwork, very similar skills. You may have done an internship that gives you a little bit of a leg up, but it's how well you communicate your value to the company and how well you can communicate the ideas, and that we think that you can communicate those ideas to the other people in the company, or if you're client-facing, to the clients that are outside the company, that will make the difference. And so it's almost, and I'll let you all just say whether it's true at your company, but when we look at resumes, we look for certain basic things, and then once we're past that, then the biggest hurdle is, will this person fit in with the culture of our company, and can they communicate the ideas? Because we don't necessarily need somebody that can come in there and keep their nose to the computer and just do everything and not be a part of the team. So, so the soft skills that Jack's talking about are much more important, I think, in an industry interview than they are in an academic interview. Question?
So what are the basic things?
The basic things that, so for our company, so you know what Schneider does, and you know what in the healthcare area. Kromite. Sorry. Cardlytics, you're probably not going to hear of Cardlytics. So unless we get really big, what we do is we power the rewards programs for about 400 banks in the United States, including Bank of America, PNC, Regions. So Bank of America deals and those types of things, that's us, but it's all incorporated into the bank website. So we're sort of the intel inside different bank reward programs. So we're very data oriented, and we need people that can, at a minimum, do SQL, do fairly complex queries. We're not asking you to be a database administrator, but you need to be able to pull your own data, be able to express how you would check that data that it's valid, and then we don't necessarily think you're going to have SAS experience as a grad student, but you need to have at least had some R or MATLAB or show some proficiency in a mathematical programming language, because we'll teach you the SAS, but you need to come in there. And I understand that everybody in this room could probably learn SQL in a day, but it shows your initiative to, at least if you haven't done anything with SQL, if somebody's just always giving you the data, go out there and learn it. Put it on your resume and spend a couple of days learning this. And so those are the basic things. We need to have a propensity for programming in a mathematical language, and so we can all get all that on the resume. But it's when you come in when you do the phone interview, or you come in for a face-to-face interview, that's where we decide whether you're the right fit for our company.
So one of the things that I always struggled with early in my career was I had all these great ideas, and I'd share them, and I thought I had pretty good communication skills, but nobody would ever listen to me, and I was just so frustrated because it was all their fault. And I remember sitting and waiting for one of our VPs to get off the phone. So you're sitting in the office waiting for him to get off the phone. What do? You look at all the books on his shelf, right? So what's he reading? What should I read? Because obviously it's all in those books. I don't remember any of the books that were on his shelf. All I remember is he had kind of like a bumper sticker almost on his wall, and that has stuck with me. It said, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Okay? So I always thought I was coming into the room with all these great credentials. I had all the analytics, I had all the technical skill set, but at the end of the day, if they didn't realize how much I cared, not about what I knew, but about their problem, their issue, and what they were trying to solve. For me, that was kind of a aha moment in my early days, saying, you know what, I think I've been doing this wrong. I've been trying to explain to people all this cool stuff I know without truly appreciating, or at least letting them understand. I thought I cared, I did care, but I never really took the time to show them how much I truly cared about their problem. And once you make that connection, the other thing I also found is that a lot of the stuff we do is very technical, right? And the person you may be talking to may never ever get that level of technical experience, right? So a lot of those decisions are not based on the quality of your academic background. At the end of the day, it comes down to, do I trust Zahir or do I not trust Zahir, right? And you don't build that level of trust based on your academic credentials. you get that level of trust based on how somebody understands that you truly care about them, about their people, about their problem. So talk about soft skills. I mean, that's the softer side of what we do, that if you cannot get that across, I think sometimes it will be a struggle. So I'm not sure how you work on it. I don't know if there's a class on that, but it's at least something to keep in the back of your mind. So they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Write that down.
So coming for like an interview kind of thing before, like what you had yesterday at the job fair, what would you look for in a candidate with 10 or 15 minutes? Like, how do you assess if this person is right?
For sure.
Okay. Yeah, I came a couple times to the job fair for Johnson & Johnson and interviewed 30 over a day and a half, I think, both times. What were we looking for? I had a little toy problem that I would give them and see if they could figure that out. Not PhD level type stuff, but about 90% did not, because they hurried up to an answer, didn't think through the logic. And so that was one thing I looked at. I didn't stop listening if they couldn't figure it out, but I wasn't as engaged after that. So there was that, and I'll tell you later if you want what that toy problem was. And then I looked for someone that would actually look at you when they're talking and smile at least once. If they could explain the research in a minute or two without going into all the delta epsilon proofs, if they could explain their research, that was very valuable to me. And I really appreciated that if they had thought about questions before they got there. So if they had thought about, if I did this, how would I fit in here? Or I read on your website that you do this and this and this, but I don't see how it needs this skill, or something like that. That really shows that this is a job they're really interested in, or could be, and what about it, and how would I fit, and what do you do, or would I be in your organization, or, you know, some kind of interaction question like that.
I was going to say that there's probably a wide variety of interview styles in an industry interview, because on my team I have one person that asks a similar question. They ask we're from Atlanta, so they ask, how many gas stations do you think there are in Atlanta? And they just want you to think through how you do that. I typically don't ask those types of questions. I get the person talking. Implicitly, I think that if you say you have certain things on your resume and that you've done those skills, I'll ask a few questions about those, and I'll figure out whether everything on your resume is real. But from that point on, I am looking for the eye contact. I'm looking for someone that has the right balance between listening and talking. So for an example, I had a phone interview. She never got called in. I asked one question. It was a 30-minute phone interview. I asked one question, and I think I sat there for 5 minutes while she talked about pretty much her whole life and everything that she wanted to do, which she probably was very good in her skills. She wouldn't have gotten a phone interview without that. But we need people that can listen and know how to take a problem. You'll find out in industry that a lot of times, if you're doing internal consulting for a company, a group will come and say, this is what we want you to figure out. And sometimes that is what you need to figure out. Sometimes that's not really what they need to know. So you need to be able to listen, find out the underlying business problem, and then attack that business problem and convince them, which is all communication skills, and convince them that what they actually want to know is this over here, not what they originally came in. So for me, I don't ask too many of the test type questions. I probably should, but I'm looking more at how you will fit in with my group. Because I have a group, and so I've got about 8 or 10 people in my group. Some of the people that report to me will ask the more technical questions. I'm trying to figure out, do you fit in with, in our case, in the startup culture that we have? Are you going to be somebody that takes the initiative and figures out the solution to a problem?
I think in a 5 or 10 minute job fair type situation, really the main things you're looking for is like eye contact, just conversation, that kind of stuff, right? We don't hire hundreds of people, right? I'm typically looking for 1 or 2. So I'm just there to collect resumes, have a good time talking to people. I enjoy meeting different people. And more often than not, I ask questions that are sort of unrelated, right? You know, where are you from, that kind of stuff, just to get a sense of how conversational we can be. I will then take the resumes back and then figure out really who we think is the right fit. From a longer term, you know, organizational fit, communication fit, that all comes out to me when we do the phone interview, bring you on site if you make that cut, so on and so forth. Personally, I don't like to put too much weight on that initial contact, that initial conversation, because at least in our world, that's not the kind of interaction you're going to have in our environment, right? It's not like you got to sell an idea in 5 minutes, right? Usually you'll have more time to do that. So I just want to use the initial contact to just vet it out to some extent and actually help people out, because I've talked to people, so the main thing I want to know is, what are you really interested in, right? Because I may have the greatest job in the world, but it may not be what you're interested in, then why waste each other's time? So I like to understand really what's in it for you, and then say, you know what, actually that's not what I'm looking for, but there may be this other area, I'll pass your resume along, or you know, you should talk to that guy over there. You know, they're really looking for, I think, what you were interested in, and that's kind of the kind of conversation I'd like to have.
I will say that at the entry level, there's going to be a lot more rejections than there are. So it's not going to be like Jack had already had a career in the Army, a lot of experience, and he got 8 or 9 offers. That if you get 8 or 9 offers, that's great, but it's not likely that you're going to get 8 or 9 offers. So my advice is, and it's hard to do, don't take the rejection personally. It's something that at this level, and you probably haven't failed at too many things in your life, but you're going to go in there for a job interview, and you are just not the right person for that job. It doesn't mean that you're not the right person for another job out there. But so take that rejection in stride. Try to learn from it. Try to think, well, did I mess up the interview? And if I did, then videotape it. Figure out what's different about your style of how you think you're portraying yourself. And so that would be one thing. And then when you do get a role, then you will then go into that role, and if it's still not your number 1 choice, but that's your offer, take it and do the best job at that role. 1, 2, 3 years from now, it may turn out to be the role that you wanted all along, and that's great. But if it's not, then now you've got some experience on your resume that's different than those people that are just coming out of school. So you can say, I'm working on real problems of significant size that bring significant value to my company. So that's something that will, on your next interview, make you stand out a little bit more, and on your next, and you keep going. You don't have to stay with the same company for 35 years. You can pick and choose later as you get more experience.
Answer the question being asked. To your point on the phone conversation, that for me is a knockout pretty early on. And if you don't understand the question, I'm totally fine with that. Come back to it with another question, but answer the question being asked, and answer it as sort of concisely and directly, and finish up with, would you like to hear more, or did I answer your question, right? Then you leave it up to me to decide, no, actually that's interesting, I want to know more about it, or no, I got it, you hit the mark, you know. So I don't ramble on, you know, it just gets really uncomfortable, and at that point I'm like, this person's not really got the listening skills I'm looking for. You know, I'll try one more time with a different question and see if I just hit you with the wrong question, but if you're not answering the question I'm asking, that's a big knockout. So that goes to listening skills though. It's not about what you know, it's really, are you truly listening?
I had one question related to what come up with Jack saying that they had 9 offers and they were evaluating them. That's wonderful. That almost never happens though. Typically one has to get, and please correct me, I'm just asking if this guy, one gets an offer and has a short period of time to make an evaluation on it. and has to decide without knowing what's behind door number 2, to use
That's right.
a metaphor they probably don't get in the game show. So, whereas in academia, it's very likely you will have multiple offers you can line up and look at. But my understanding is in industry, it's much more common to where you have to evaluate an offer on its own merits, and it's a yes or no without knowing what else is around. Is that fair to say?
That's fair, yes. I think it's rare that you will have, you might have 2, because if you decide, at this point you're all deciding you're going into the market, and you might have 2 or maybe 3 to choose from. A few years from now, if your first job is not giving you everything that you wanted in your career, you're going to start looking again. And it might be that you get 2 offers at once that you can choose from. But as Neil says, it's likely that you're going to have to look at an offer, and you're going to have to come up with some objective way, like Jack was saying, of evaluating those. You can't jump from one job and then a month later jump to another job without that adversely impacting your future ability to get a role. Because if I see on your resume that you only stayed somewhere for 1 or 2 months, that either means A, you didn't cut it at that job, which is bad, or B, you didn't have the loyalty to stick with that job. It takes a long time for us to fill a role. This is something that when we have an open position, we start our HR people looking at it, then we go through the phone interviews, then we bring people in. So we want people to stay. We want to find the right person, and it would be a red flag if you changed. Probably, I'd say less than a year. Maybe you can do that once, but you're gonna have to stick with the role. You make a decision. Think about it. Analytics is such a hot area that you're gonna find something at some point in the future, and it's probably better to have the role where you're getting paid, getting experience, and then it may take you another year to find that other role. But I would.
Plus, you'll run into those people somewhere else down
Right.
the line.
Oh, yeah.
Right, your network starts, it's already started, right? You're going to run into a lot of your PhD candidate friends and your professors and everything else, but every job, your network grows. And I could run down and look at the amazing impact some of the jobs I've had. Maybe weren't fantastic jobs, but they impact. I work for some great people, and they become your network. It's amazing. And you just don't know, right? Until that person goes out and does great things, and they say, hey, I remember Jack over here, and he was doing pretty good. Let's bring him in. So, just like in high school, what Warren was saying, in high school, I don't know how many of you said, I'm going to be an engineer, or I want to be an operations research person. Who says that, right? I mean, once in a while, 1 out of 100 will actually say it, mean it, and do it. But the rest of it, you don't know what that is. I want to be a civil engineer. Why? Have you built bridges before? And you know you want to do that? No, so you like math or numbers, or your father's a civil engineer, or your mother's a scientist, or whatever, right? So go in and try that job and give it your best effort. You'll learn an awful lot. Every job has some kind of interesting part to it, even if the drive is bad or whatever. And then do a great job. You'll be a hero to somebody in your company. And after 2-3 years, you're going to live a long time. You're not, this is not, a 20-year career and you're done and you stay in one job. You're probably going to move on no matter what. I thought you were going to be at UPS until you were 90.
I thought so too.
Yeah, and so give it that good shot 2-3 years, and then you'll have a good network, people around you. You could spend 2 to 3 years looking for that great set of other opportunities. And without this hassle of, I got to get a job now because I owe $400 here and $2,000 here, and I also wouldn't take it just for the money in the first job. I would take it for, if it's an area that really could use you, you'd be of value, you're going to work for somebody really good. That's really important, to work for somebody good, either a fast mover, depending on how ambitious, or real smart, or just a really great person that could be a mentor. That's a good reason to take a job as opposed to another $5,000 a year someplace.
On the flip side, I told my wife that we would move to Green Bay, Wisconsin just for 3 years, and then we'll be out. And here we are 17 years later, quite happy. So you never know, right? You never know how it's going to go. And also, it's not that, every day of each one of those 17 years has been fantastic. I've looked around a couple of times. The reason I really appreciate this community, because especially the practice conference, because if you haven't worked too many other places, don't be stuck with the bias of where you are, okay? The grass is not always greener somewhere else. I use this conference as group therapy, right? So when I have struggles at work and I say, oh my God, UPS, they're a much bigger company, they've got this down. So I go talk to my good friend Ranga at UPS or Jack, and I say, so you guys have this figured out, right? Well, kinda, it's a real pain, right? So I'm like, oh, so they haven't figured it out either. So then I talked to somebody at FedEx, and I talked to somebody somewhere else, like, nobody's really got this figured out. So why am I trying to think that I'll go somewhere else and life will be a lot easier? Maybe that's the problem to work on, right? Nobody's figured that thing out. That's the problem I want to fix. So think about it that way as well.
Any questions about certain industries or what did you come in hoping to get at this hour and a half?
A job offer?
I have a question. How important is a previous job experience and just fresh out of PhD?
How important is previous job experience when you're just fresh out of a PhD? I mean, they know that right from the beginning, so they're not, I don't think they're not being compared against...
I have a job experience and I used to work in Morocco for 3 years, so before any data.
So that would be not an unexpected plus, I would say.
Okay.
Right? Assuming that it's something relevant and that you did pretty well, and that your references there will say that. Because I always call references, and for the top few finishers, I'll call references and make sure that they actually did work there, so things like that.
If these are new PhDs, their references are going to be their advisors
Yeah.
who dealt with them in an academic setting.
Right.
How does that affect how that considered? How do you judge that? The influence, the germaneness of that toward your industry?
I'll answer. I'm sure you all have different answers. I would say that if the only references you have are academic, number one, I assume that they're completely biased. They want their student to get hired by a good company, but that's okay. And depending on what I'm hiring them for, if I'm hiring them for kind of a client-facing thing, I'll ask that type of question. If I'm hiring for a really solid, hard, solve this, crack this nut type of issue, then I'll ask them that. Are they the type of person who really digs in? Or did they work with a team, or they do something on their own, and how do they do? So I'll ask that type of question. Teamwork versus the
What do graduate students' teaching experience be better?
graduate student teaching experience.
If some do teach and some don't, when someone says I'm talking, I can indicate to you that he has better communication, or she has better communication skills.
Sorry, but to me, no. I wouldn't jump there.
Okay.
I've had some really bad graduate student teachers.
Yeah.
And I may have been one, but I mean, I've had some bad ones, so it doesn't.
I guess if there were evaluations that went with it and said, this student, that came out in the conversation, and you say, this student was a TA and, did this class and always got great, evaluations from their students, that would probably play into it, but probably wouldn't be a question I would ask. It might just come up in the conversation.
They can use that as part of their sales pitch.
Yeah.
I think that experience will help you in your interview. You've done a lot more talking to people. You've done a lot more trying to figure out how to say it the right way so they understand what you're saying when you're teaching. So,
If I saw that on the resume, I'd probably ask questions about it. How did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Not to say that there's a right or wrong answer, because if I'm looking for somebody who is going to be standing up in front of people on a regular basis, then I'm looking for one kind of answer. But if I'm not looking for that kind of person and they were honest and they told me, I tried it. It was interesting. Quite honestly, I didn't really enjoy it. I can do it, but that's not what I get up every morning all fired up to do. I would appreciate that answer just as much, depending on the role I was looking for. Yep.
To kind of answer your question about what you were looking for, at least I can speak for myself, and I would say that when you're looking for an academic job, the procedure is kind of laid out to you. You You know exactly how the process is going to be ever since you submitted that cover letter, your resume, your CV, yada, yada. You know exactly what it's going to be and when you're going to hear back from them. Industries, it's so different because, like you said, I mean, over here, for every question we've been having 3 different answers. You know, is there some sort of a common theme or something that we as applicants should kind of look forward to, signals that we can use? Kind of say, am I going to get it? Am I not going to get it?
No.
You know, there might be some across large as opposed to small. So I don't know how many people are in Cardlytics. How many
analysts?
few, just
There's
people.
only 270 people in the
270
company.
people. There are 10 in my company.
Yeah.
270, and
Well, the company's 20,000, but for this kind of a role, 50.
so, and then the large ones are going to have a whole HR department, and
Right.
if you tick them off, you're not going to get anybody. If you miss their deadlines, or if you do, I mean, it's going to be really hard if you know, miss those hoops with the HR. In my company, you know, it's me and 9 others, and we'll hire the best person. And we'll give people slack on this and this and that, and I'm sure there's everything in between. So,
I think that's a good distinction, like the big ones, if you're talking like an IBM or something like that, right? I think I don't know, but I'm expecting there's a little more sort of standardized process there. But even for us, you call us a medium-sized company, but we're not hiring these kinds of folks on a regular basis, right? So we're geared to hiring drivers, customer service representatives. I mean, those things have sort of a machine processing those applications, getting those folks in. Even in our case, it tends to be, you know, depending on the situation as well. We'll be going through a job interview process and suddenly, you know, well, hiring freeze. Like, okay, you know, sorry, what are you going to do? So I would say it's kind of preparation for what the job's going to be like. If you're looking for something pretty repeatable, pretty predictable, then maybe I might suggest, I don't know for sure, but maybe a larger company might give you that. I know we've had some guys that came in and said, you know, GE has this rotational program. Why don't we have a rotational program? At our size, for these kinds of roles, it takes a lot of effort to put in rotational programs. I tell people for our company, if you're expecting me to kind of map out your career for you over the next 4 years, I'm more than happy to have lunch with you and talk to you about it and discuss it, but there's nothing here that maps out your career for you for this kind of role. You better be willing to take ownership of your role and stepping out and doing a lot of that yourself. Because if that's the kind of person you are, then you will probably be more successful. Because that's the way I did it. So it's worked for me. But if you're looking for somebody that says, for the first year you're in this role, then for the next year we move you into that role, we don't have that kind of a setup. And if that's important to you, then make sure you find a company that's large enough to provide that kind of setup.
So I've worked for both large companies, well actually most of my experience has been with very large companies, Lucent Technologies, UPS, and the Home Depot. So this is my first experience with a smaller company, but so for a larger company, you can get more feedback from other people that have gone through the process. And it also depends on how many PhDs are in that company. When I was finishing up my PhD, my first job was with Lucent Technologies, so they had Bell Labs, and it was a process where you came in and you talked to a lot of people, and then the final part of the interview process was you brought in part of your PhD research or a talk, and you gave it to 20 or 30 people, and they asked you questions. It was an interesting experience, and so that's how that culture did it. In our company, analytics is a big part of it, but we want the analytics to be kind of behind the scenes so that we're delivering marketing value to companies. So our process, we don't get, unless you're going to go out and talk to the clients, you're just talking to the analytics people, and it's a one-on-one interview. But there's just a wide range. Unfortunately, for every company, there's hiring freezes. There's the fact that I've got a lot of other things to do, so I may not read that email. I may forget to call you back and say, hey, you know, come in for the interview, and then the HR department will tell me, hey, what about this process? So there's going to be just gaps in the communication. And I guess that's the other thing. You aren't going to get a whole lot of feedback from a commercial company. And it's primarily for litigation reasons. I'm not going to tell you that you didn't make the interview and give you the reasons why you didn't get the job. You're just going to be told we're going with somebody else. You know, there's too many possibilities that you will say, well, for X reason, that's why. You know, they told me this, and that's not true. Therefore, I'm gonna litigate. So you're being told at every company. It's mainly at the larger companies. There's certain questions you cannot ask legally, and then don't. Even when the candidate contacts you for feedback, then just ignore that email, because let the HR department take care of it. So
I forward those to HR. Sorry.
How much of a case interviews are you guys having for this type of positions, like analytics positions? Is there any case interviews that you're having, like any positions that MBAs are going through, or is there any similarity to positions that PhD students can get and MBA students are being doing as well?
I didn't understand the question.
Case interviews. Do you do case interviews?
Oh, like a case study kind of? Oh.
We don't do case interviews. Johnson & Johnson, we didn't do any case interviews when I was interviewing for them.
We do not do case interviews. We've talked about it. It would be, on one hand, it would be a way of differentiating the candidates on not necessarily just the soft skills, but on how they look at the problem. And Jack already says that he asks some questions. We've talked about having a case study, but there's a lot of work in creating a case study. And then you also don't want, you know, if you've got a couple of people that have already interviewed for it and they know what type of case study it is, then, you know, there can be some changes there that you'd have to make. So at this point, our company's not big enough to do a case study, but I think some of the bigger consulting companies, like I know McKinsey is big on a case study. There's a lot of companies that will do that just to see how well you react and where your thinking takes you. So, but we don't.
We asked J&J, when we were hiring, we were looking for 3 or 4 PhD level analytics folks, and every one of them had to, over the 5 or 6 years that we were interviewing, had to present. If they got to the site visit level, they all had to present. So we expected like a 45-minute presentation of work, and you kind of talk it through. You'd have a point of contact at that company. Would kind of show you around, make sure you got there, make sure HR is answering your questions, things like that. Then you talk with them about the topic so that it's somewhat relevant or somewhat interesting to the rest of the folks. And then we bring in the whole group and we'd all watch. And that played a huge part. You'd also interview the rest of that day, but the presentation played a huge part about what people thought of you. So that was pretty important. It was nice because it was on something you get to choose. We might, you know, take a little part of that, but it was work that you should be confident and competent in. It wasn't some other kind of surprise case study.
Yeah, we've done that. We've, in some cases, said present something that you know well, that you're comfortable presenting, and we don't care, whatever it is. And if it relates to what we have, great. If not, that's okay. When we set up our interviews, we do have a very structured interview process. So you will go through some interviews that are one-on-one, some interviews that might be more like panel-like. And at each one of those interviews, as a candidate, you may figure it out, you may not. But there are certain characteristics, behavioral characteristics, that those interviewers are looking for. Not that they wouldn't notice the other ones, they know all the other ones, but they're looking for very specific things. So you go through all day of interviews, and then we get together, all of us that did the interview, and do what we call a consensus. And in that consensus, as you go through your interview notes, you're saying, okay, so I was here, you know, looking for communication skills and this and this. I think this candidate, she did well on this, not so good on that, blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of get to see both sides of the candidate, or multiple dimensions of the candidate, because you might have somebody say, well, I was doing the technical side, and I didn't find any communication issues there. She was very good. I mean, she laid out her case study, blah, 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 internship she worked at. She did a great job. So I'm not sure why you saw communication issues. She was, you know, so then we kind of get into it a little bit and said, oh, maybe because of this, or maybe because of that. So that's kind of how we try to get a 360-degree view of a candidate in a day. We also do an informal lunch interview. So it's not supposedly an interview, but the lunch person doesn't necessarily have anything specific. It's supposed to be the candidate's time to relax, ask questions. But sometimes we get interesting stuff there, I mean, don't eat spaghetti and meatballs.
Yeah, question?
How do you do the initial screening of candidates? I mean, what are the key things that you're looking at? And is there any ideal size of resume for an entry-level person?
So, resume, if you can fit it on one page, that's great. But for an entry-level person, don't go over 2 pages. I mean, I don't even think I have a 2-page resume, and I've been doing this for 15 years. So you need to be able to. So if the resume is, you're going to have 10 or 15 seconds on average, for that person to look at it. And the resume does not get you the job. The resume gets you the interview. So by putting too much on the resume, then you're actually hindering your chances. You need to have a resume that's sort of focused on a certain type of industry or things like that. But so the resume itself is not getting you the job. It's getting you the interview. The screening, that's sort of hit or miss whether or not your HR department is searching for certain keywords. So here's how the dynamic works, even small companies and big companies. HR is supposed to screen the hundreds of resumes and give you the dozens of resumes, but they don't know anything about analytics. So they can screen other jobs really well, but when you give them something that says, I want these types of skills, sometimes they'll look for, I'm trying to think of an example, but you might want optimization skills. Well, if that person said mixed integer programming and didn't say optimization, then the HR department might say, oh, this guy doesn't know anything about optimization. So there is some back and forth with HR. You just need to talk about what you're doing in a couple of different ways. Put SQL in there. I talked about it earlier. Many of you know SQL, and you think that's such a basic part of your job that you wouldn't even put that on your resume, because doesn't everybody know how to pull some data out of a database? Well, we early on, when we were trying to hire some people, we found that some people that could clearly do SQL were not even putting that on there. They were putting R and SAS and MATLAB and all these other things, but they weren't making it through the screening process because they didn't have SQL. So you're going to have to look at the job description, and if the job description says you need SQL and either one of R or MATLAB or SAS, then make sure your resume says SQL and one of those other 3. So you've got to look at the job description, but it's kind of hit or miss.
What's nice about here is that you don't have HR getting in the way. So it's great. You have interviews here, that's the best way, I think, because they see you, you're a live resume, right? You get that 15 to 20 minutes, and it's really great. And then what we used to do, I don't know if they still do that, we used to have callbacks the next day. I did that with J&J a couple of times. So the first, like Sunday and Monday, we do it, and then the next day you have callbacks.
I think they should.
So I mean, it's really great. And HR is not in the way, and you understand all the words, and people, So I really recommend you take advantage of anything you can do here. Brings up another thing, which is, I know you guys are much smarter on social media than I am, and ever will be, but LinkedIn, it's growing for a reason. And if you want to buy a good stock, it's probably a good stock. But it's growing for a reason. They're doing things, they're really connecting people. And I just hired a guy that he's just wonderful on LinkedIn, and he spins circles around me. But he'll find out everything about what college, both undergrad and grad, and who's connected there, how many steps away are you, can I contact someone to get an intro over there. And I gave him a list of like 15 companies that I wanted to be able to get into somehow that I don't have contacts. And in a day, 10 out of the 15, he had emails back from them. Because he just went around and found them. And you can do the same thing. And what he's been doing and other folks have been doing that I've seen are using LinkedIn to contact folks once either you know them or you're one step away from them, get an introduction, and then ask them if they'll put your resume in. You get someone in the company that puts your resume in. Some companies, that's a step up, or it gets through the HR hurdle, or it gets through any one of those little hurdles. They're little hurdles, but they're major if you don't make it through, right? So any one of those little hurdles that you can get through, I think is a benefit, and then until you can actually talk to the person and find out if it's right for you. So I would use LinkedIn. I'm sure there are others, Facebook as well, but really the common one in business is LinkedIn right now. Everybody uses it, and you can do searches on it. You can really recommend using it.
LinkedIn would be the one I would go to as well.
LinkedIn, one of the things about LinkedIn that will set you apart, you'll know who you're supposed to be interviewing with. Look them up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I said I don't have a 2-page resume, but I've got probably a 30-page LinkedIn profile. And you should, if you're coming to interview with me, you should at least know what I've done in the past. And you'd be surprised, at least half of the people, we'll send them a Outlook invitation that says, here are the 4 people that you're going to be meeting with. And guess what? I look to see if that person looked at my LinkedIn profile, because I can tell.
Yep.
And if that person didn't, they're already starting out behind the 8 ball.
Yeah. It's very transparent.
Yeah, it's
good and bad.
And so you want to be able to, because you as the interviewee need to be able to relate some of your background and some of your studies to the person that's talking to you. So by not taking even the 5 minutes that it would take to get on LinkedIn and look at my profile, then it's bad. So use LinkedIn. Try to find out as much about the people that you are interviewing with. If there's an area, if they've written some papers, a number of these people already have PhDs, so you need to know what things they are interested in. And it gets back to all these soft skills. You've got the hard skills. What you need is the experience and the chance to get that experience. And unfortunately, it's you have to keep trying in the interview process and practice, but give yourself every leg up to read the bios of the people, but also make sure that you ask good questions, as Jack said earlier, and give yourself every reason for that person to say, out of the 15 people that I interviewed for this role, this person stood out head and shoulders above everybody else. This person is a clear winner, rather than, there's probably 3 or 4 people, so we'll figure out whether we want this person or that person. You want to be that clear winner.
One way to, I think, frame it would be, whatever conversation you're having, try to make it a story, right? Rather than make it a bullet list of things. I've done this, 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 and this. It's efficient, I get the point. But I think if it's a story, right, stories tend to stick in people's minds, right? It's shown, people learn through stories, especially adult learners are more story-oriented. Even when you're communicating your data, we ask people to, tell a story. What is the data saying? It's not a bunch of charts and graphs and tables. There's a story behind it. What I'm looking for in a person is, can you give the data a voice, right? That's what I'm looking for in a good analyst, is somebody who can take that data and tell a compelling story about why we should or shouldn't do something, or why something makes sense or doesn't make sense. So it's no different than for you, right? You are the thing being analyzed. Make it a compelling story, right? And all the facts and things about you, put it in a story form. At least for me, it tends to stick a little better. I like that story she told me about her experience at blah, blah, blah internship, right? It doesn't have to be I did a great job and I saved $1 million. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how compelling was that actual story. So try that.
I have a question about salary. So in academic jobs, it seems it's not good to talk about the pay until you get the offer. Is it the same in the industry? Points that you start negotiating for the salary?
Sure.
Well, there's one rule that most people try to follow is he that brings up money first loses. So that's a good common rule that I've used, that just delay the money part to see if it's a fit. If it's not a fit, it doesn't matter. And if it is a good fit, then okay, great. Then you could start talking about it. But I would always delay it until you get really serious about the position. It's certainly nothing you would bring up in an initial or even a second interview, probably. And in other words, they may try to ask you if, you know, what kind of salary you're looking for. And,
We try to get that.
and I usually recommend that people say, well, you know, I'm still trying to figure out if this is a good fit. Rather than say, well, I'm looking for, you know, 85. And the guy was thinking, oh, good, because I was thinking 100. I'll go 85, great. So, you know, I just recommend you don't bring it up until you're real serious and they force it. But
I agree. I've gone with the he who talks salary first loses philosophy also. If somebody, but sometimes they will make you say what you're expecting, and in that case, be honest. You know, what you don't want to do is you don't want to start out real high because maybe there's 3 candidates and you've decided you're going to start out a little bit high, and while the other candidates, because you didn't do your homework and make yourself stand out, then they say, well, okay, this other person is $10,000 cheaper. We'll make the offer to the other person. So try to make that story about how you are the best for that job, and what will go through the hiring manager's head is, yeah, they're asking for $5,000 more than what we have slotted for this, but $5,000 isn't a whole lot. We can fill this now with the right person. So if you make that, if you can make that story in the interviewer's head before you start talking about salary. So I would say at least the 3rd interview, you know, that's when you're going to get down to salary. But sometimes they will force you to say something and give a range. Say, I'm looking for something, and give a pretty wide range. And if they, you know, in that case, it's like, well, you know, there's certain things about this role that I don't know yet, and you know, so this is the range that I'm looking for.
Use your entry-level position to your advantage. Say, I don't know. Right? I've never worked anywhere before. You know, say that in a better way. On salary.com, it sounds like the range is this, and I assume that will be a fair range. You know, assuming that it's fair to you. You can say I had, you know, another offer somewhere else that I did not take because whatever, it was on the wrong side of the country. That offer was for this much, so I assume that's a fair range. You know, so state it in a sort of positive way. Ranges are great. Don't get stuck on a number. And then absolutely follow it up with, you know, what I'm really looking for is the right fit. My wife swears I took the job at Schneider because I could wear jeans to work on Fridays. You know, I used to work at a stuffy suit and tie. Well, not entirely wrong. I'm not a suit and tie kind of guy. I had to remember to bring this for this conversation. So there are certain parts of the job that, you know, it's not about the money really. You know, it's the environment, you know, the organization. I felt really comfortable at Schneider. Felt like, yeah, you know, this is a place that I'd be happy. At that point, the $5,000 may go the other way. And you know what? I'll take $5,000 less because, you know, this is the place I really want to work. Now it was my 2nd job, so I had, you know, a little more to go on. So it'll depend on your situation. But
you can ask.
So should I put the reference on the resume?
Should you put a reference on the resume?
Yeah.
If you have a good one, yes. I mean, someone that you've talked to that'll say good things about you, and sure.
I usually do the available upon request type thing is what I usually see. So when people want them, they'll reach out to you. I'm not going to call references as I'm screening resumes. More than likely, I'm going to get through the interview process, and when I'm down to 3 people, that's when I'm going to say, okay, let's get some references for these 3. So somebody had asked earlier, you know, are there signals? I think you had asked, right? That could be a good, at least from my standpoint, that's a signal. When people are asking for your references, now you kind of know that you're kind of getting to, because it takes time for me to call a reference. So if I know I'm going to take the time to call your references, that's probably a sign.
Thank you.
Yes.
You said that you work with large companies and small companies. Which one do you think is better for starting?
For starting, that's a great question. I think I really liked starting at a big company because there was a a process in place. You could learn from a lot of different people. Lucent at the time had, Bell Labs, and so we had people that were doing cutting-edge research in a number of different areas. The thing about it is that if it's a big enough company and you're doing optimization that shaves off a few % here and there, when you convert that into real dollars, it's millions and millions of dollars. It looks like really good experience, and it also allows you to work with data sets that are real, significant size. So I think now you could find that with a small company. I'll say the small company I'm in right now has a lot of data and has a lot of interesting problems to work on. Now that said, I almost didn't come to Cardlytics because I didn't know what Cardlytics was, and I was pursuing other opportunities with companies that you've heard of. And at first I turned down Cardlytics because I didn't know who they were or what they did. But once I found that out, then that changed my mind. So at this point in my career, the risk versus reward I can do with a small company. But a large company gives you a lot more problems to work on. Of course, the way Lucent Technologies tanked, I guess there was a lot of risk in a large company too.
Yeah, we're kind of a different age, maybe, when we grew up, and so I personally agree with you about the large company. But then, unless the small company is called Google or Facebook, or I mean, there's a lot of opportunity out there with some of these small startups. But you've got to be in that mindset of the high risk. I'm going to give this a shot, give it everything, and in 2 years, if I'm broke because they went out of business, okay, that was a good experience, and then I'll move on and start my career with a big company. But if that's not your personality, I would recommend a big company. You got the healthcare, you got the systems, you have a safety net in place. They expect brand new people to have some problems. On the other hand, if I hired somebody from here right now, I want them to come in running. I can't afford. I have 9 people working full time, and I'm checking in with all 9 of them every day, doing problems, contacting. I can't afford to have someone not know how to talk to a client or teaching them how to. Every hour I spend teaching somebody is an hour I'm not, bringing in more business or working on a model. It's a little more intense. A big company, it's set up so that you can do these 10-hour, 8-hour days, and you can learn from people above you or people above them. There'll be some bad things about bureaucracy, but that's something you got to learn too, right? So I would say the big company is a nice way to start.
So I'll take the other side, and I'll say start possibly with a smaller company, not because one is right or wrong, but just to give you a different perspective. Well, first of all, I would say it doesn't depend on the size of the company, it depends on you, right? You got to find the right fit for you. In a smaller company, if you're the kind of person that has a lot of initiative and is willing to get out there and do stuff, you may find phenomenal opportunities because you will be, the company I used to work for, they were a food and ingredients manufacturing company, and they were my first job out of college, and there was a small total quality management group. I was an industrial engineer by training, but I have a computer engineering background. The fact that I could do stuff with databases that nobody else could do, right? Suddenly I'm the go-to guy, right? Just because I can do stuff, and that's not why I joined the company, but suddenly I find I'm providing great value, and through that value, I'm doing other work that I was really interested in. But then after a couple of years, a few other things got in the way, but I found myself a little bit in the the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed is king, right? I'm the only person here who can do any kind of optimization, right? And I have nobody to bounce the stuff off of. I've just gotten out of college. Unless I come here or contact my college buddies, I've got nobody to talk to. So then I go to Schneider, and there's a group of 15 people there, and I'm like, wow, this is going to be the greatest thing. There's 15 other people that I can talk to about these kinds of problems. So that's kind of how it worked for me, and it worked out pretty well. So I wouldn't say it's just about go big, go small. Try to find the role. The one thing I would look into is, I don't know how you can do this, maybe you guys have ideas, but try to find out what their, if you're going for a small company, try to find out what their technology infrastructure looks like. Because if your first job is going to be, here, take all these big, if it's a really, really small and possibly a little older company, take these big files of mainframe tapes and turn it into some data you can analyze. If you're excited about that, great, good for you. That wouldn't be something that I'd like to be my first job. I don't think there's a long future in that. So I don't know if you can find that information out, unfortunately. Maybe something through LinkedIn you could do, or some searches on the web. If you can find out what their technology infrastructure looks like, that might be a signal for whether you can really do the kinds of analysis they're asking you to do. You should be interviewing the company just as much as the company's interviewing you. So that's a question you should maybe just outright ask in the interview. Could you tell me more about your technology infrastructure? I can't think of anybody that's asked me that question. That's a great question.
Yeah, you should ask that. That's a great question.
Yes.
With that being said, so is there a risk of being overqualified for the job? A risk?
That's just the wrong position for you then. Yeah, but yeah, sure. You have a test. I know it's a terrible thing, unfortunately. Hey, I'm willing to work down here, but you're generally not picked for those jobs because they think that you're just working down there and you won't be happy. So it may seem like you're getting someone really qualified, really smart at a lower price and a lower position. That's great, but often you don't get selected because they just don't think you're going to be happy. Let's go for it.
The last thing I want to do is go through the process all over again.
Yeah. A year from now, you'll find a better job, and so I'll lose you. That's another comment then, right?
Yeah.
You're overqualified for this one, so I can't afford to pay you $100,000 for this. You really should be getting that. So I know I'll lose you in a year.
I think as PhD graduates, we're also competing with those master graduates, right, in some positions. And I'm wondering, I'm curious, what kind of soft skills companies see in PhD graduates that will kind of differentiate us from those master students?
What kind of soft skills you need to have to differentiate yourself?
Well, from your side, why do you want to hire a PhD graduate if we're not talking about, programming skill, modeling skill, but on the soft skill side? Is there any?
I'm still not quite getting the question.
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So when I'm interviewing PhD students, I'm very clear that if they're looking for a job where they're sort of want to be at the leading edge of algorithm development in their certain area or in whatever area I'm in, there's a chance that might happen, but they should not be coming into the job with that idea in mind, right? The job is, I like to solve problems. This is the domain, and you have some compatibility, network optimization, yep, that's good. And you're passionate about solving problems, right? That's what I'm looking for. So my concern sometimes with PhD candidates, that's why I want to be very clear with them, is that this Schneider, there's other companies, Google, whatever, right? If you're doing cutting edge research, if you want that, then you should be going and talking to those people. You shouldn't be coming and talking to a Schneider. That's just the way it is, and I'll be as honest as possible as I can with you. Not that we don't do some cutting edge work, but it's usually more in applying something that was done in a unique and novel way. And that's what should get you excited. That if you're excited about the solution, there is no greater satisfaction to me than talking to anybody in the organization, but especially one of our drivers who comes up to me and says, hey, that thing that, that's pretty cool. He has no idea what went into it, but to him, he's making more money, or he's being able to deliver on time. Or somebody in the office saying, hey, that stuff you guys put in last week, that's made my life a lot better. That's what I live for. Because now I know I can go home with a big smile on my face, because there's a lot of other work that's happened all through that has made nobody's life better. We just ended up wasting money, right? So if you're excited about that and using what you bring to the table to have that kind of an impact, that's what I'm looking for people. But that's just me, that's the work I do. Every company is going to have something different, and that's what you have to kind of figure out is what do you want, and does it match with what that company is looking for?
I agree. The other thing is that if you're interviewing with me, because I have a PhD and I know the whole process, That's one thing, which is why you should look on LinkedIn to see if the person that you're talking to has a PhD. But if you're interviewing with somebody that does not have their PhD, then you need to spend a little bit of time identifying exactly what Zahir just said, which is you may not be working on cutting edge research, but what you have done and have been proven to do is take an original path to solving a problem. And so that is the key differentiator between you and somebody with a master's, is that you have taken something that nobody else has solved and you've solved it. So that right there is of great value to a company, because there are going to be some problems that they will have that will require some original thinking in terms of solving it. Now, whether or not that's publishable, it won't be publishable because the company won't let you publish it. It's also one of the things that you don't even have to, contrary to like an academic position where you have to prove that it's something new and unique. Well, in an academic or in an industry position, it might be new and unique. I don't know, and I really don't care. If this is something that I used to solve the problem and we got value out of it, then that's great. I don't have to go through the literature and find out that nobody else has done anything like this before. There are some things that I've done for the companies I've worked for that I'm sure are publishable material, but you know, I just looked at it, I did it, solved it. Next problem, looked at it, did that, and solved it. So recognize that somebody that hasn't gotten a PhD doesn't understand that fundamental reason behind the PhD is that you took a problem and solved something that nobody else did, and that should be what differentiates you from somebody with a master's.
Most of the students in PhD, even though they might work on problems that are trying to model real life problems, they're far from what happens in real life. So when someone comes for an interview and seeing the job description, and you ask questions about real problems, what if most of their answers are no, and I don't know, how critical would you be about it? Or how is it this candidate not fit for the job, or how would you still think about
most of the answers are no about, did you model this, did you model this, did you model this? Well, probably you didn't because nobody else has either, right? I mean, you're on your PhD, you're trying to do the best and solve a problem that no one else has, so probably no one else has either. Or they have, but they didn't do it at a level that you were able to reach, either in speed or in minimizing cost or whatever it was that you were doing. And so I would think you could come back with that, as no one else has either. And actually, I now have reached this, and now I can start thinking about these real world problems. And I think yesterday morning, I think it was Jack Levis was talking about, I think it was anyway, where he was talking, and you were probably in the room during that breakfast. And it was, that's a great area of conversation between you and the interviewer, right? Say, oh, what can we do here? You know, what is it? What's special about this? Or why is that different? And just start digging, because they're the experts in the field of what real world is, right? That you're interviewing with them. It's their industry. And so ask them more about that one specific problem and why it's hard or why it's different or why it isn't the same for every different location or whatever. And a great chance to get into problem solving with them, and all of a sudden you two are a team trying to solve this problem. You know what I mean? As opposed to just a yes or no and afraid what that response is going to be. You ask questions about it and really dig, think about it. And ask
I would say that the answer shouldn't be, your answer in the interview shouldn't be no. It should be no, I didn't do that, but it's because I didn't have a real world data set to work with. That's an interesting issue. I would like to find out what the implications are. I was at a talk yesterday, and the person had used a data set of 300. We're looking at trying to do things with data sets that are 35 or 40 million. So I understand that that what you all have at your disposal is not a real-world data set, but talk about the opportunities, sort of like you do at the end of a journal article that you write. What are the next steps? What's my future research in this? This is where I'm going to take this. My next step is to get a larger data set, and we look at times where we're missing the data from this segment, or we're doing this, and turn it into a conversation about what you could learn from that, rather than, one of the quickest ways to I guess squash an interview is that when I ask you a question, that you come back with a 1 or 2 word answer. I'm trying to get you to talk, and I will typically not ask you a yes or no question. I will ask you a question that gets you into something, but we're not looking for just a yes or no 1 word answer.
Or blow it off completely and say, well, that probably wouldn't matter at all.
Yeah.
That would not.
Yeah, that would be bad.
So there's an old saying, right? In theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. If your research was a little more theoretical, right? I think you can speak to the benefits that a good theoretical foundation provides, right? Because most of practice, all of practice is really based on some form of theory that had come before it. But when I ask that question and say, well, did you consider this in your research or in this paper? You say, no, I didn't. But here's the theoretical foundation that this paper lays, right? And those are sort of the interesting things that I'm looking forward to doing and seeing if I can incorporate that into this theoretical foundation. And if not, right, where that might go and how we might solve it differently. This may not actually be the best way to solve that problem. There may be other theoretical pieces that we can reach out to and sort of combine the two together. Because really that's what I'm looking for, is that you're being creative on how to solve the problem. If we take some really cool theory and use that and solve it, that's fantastic, right? It's a great thing to talk about over beers after work, but in the heat of the moment, getting that problem solved is really the main thing. And if you can do it faster, if you can find a way to get me to 95% of the solution in a spreadsheet, I'll take it, right? And you can get me that extra 5% by spending the next 6 months, really implementing this other idea. If we have the time and money for that one, and I think there's future value, we may consider it, but I'll take the spreadsheet right now.
One question has not come up. Oh, if there's one, please go.
Yeah, just one question. Could you use several keywords to describe what kind of approach candidates would like keywords? Some companies may be looking for initiative, some companies
Keyword. You want to know if we use keywords in helping HR search for a candidate?
Yeah.
Right?
What are you looking for?
I don't know if there is a formalized list anywhere. For me personally, I'm looking for keywords like creative, initiative, problem focused, solution focused. Those are the things those are the keywords that I am looking for. That's going to vary depending on the role, the company, the person. So there's just too many variables out there, I think.
I would say that you have to look at the job description, because we've written that job description with the keywords in there that we are interested in. So if that job description has a few things in there that you would like to highlight on your resume, then change it to those keywords. So that would be helpful.
I think that's a great way to do it. You're right.
I don't like the keywords. Sorry.
Neil, yeah.
Yeah, one thing I thought would be useful, both, and especially since y'all have experience with those smaller and larger companies, is with whom, if they were to get jobs, with whom would they be working? Would it be a big group of others like them? Would they be the only analytics person in the group? Are they going to be, quote unquote, the smartest guys in the room? Are they going to have people they can work with, people that they can actually be mentors to them, which would be the equivalent of a senior professor in my field?
Right.
So, does that vary? Can go on that? Because that's something that, everyone's used to having a major professor at this point.
Yeah,
Sure.
don't know, I'd say depends what field you're in. I would think if you're saying, you're calling yourself Mr. and Ms. Analytics, there are probably a lot of companies that don't do much in analytics right now and that know that they have to because they keep seeing all these advertisements and everything. So they're going to hire somebody in analytics. So you do run the risk of being the only person in there, I would think. There are a number of companies. If you say optimization, I think you're probably going to be hired to be part of an optimization or an analytical team that does simulation and optimization or something like that. So I would think, in my mind anyway, that's how I'm kind of thinking that it would go. It's you only in a couple of those very specific fields. If that's what you put down, you might end up being the only person.
I think in a smaller company, it's possible that you'll be probably not a team of one, more likely a team of two. I know when the company I started in, my boss had his PhD in chemical engineering and statistics, and this was sort of his vision of so he was hiring a few more technical people to help support him. So it was that kind of feeling. At Schneider, it's a little bit different. And there, usually we don't put an entry-level person on a project and say, here, blah, 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 call for maintenance, go figure that out. We'll usually pair you up with either one of the managers or one of the lead or senior engineers that have been there, so kind of mentoring that way. But then, once you've hit the ground, and depending on how long it takes you to get comfortable, some people 6 months, some people maybe a little longer, then, we'll start kind of letting you go out on your own and say, here, go, so-and-so called, and I'll make sure. I mean, if my role's different now, but I used to lead our OR group, so depending on who called, right, I know that person's personality in the company, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to send the new guy to that guy, right? Or I'm going to go with you. Or this other person, Jack's really cool. Jack understands the world, he knows what we do, so I'll send you, go talk to Jack. But, then I'll reach out to Jack and say, hey, by the way, he's one of our newer people, right? Let me know how it goes, give me some feedback. So, it's kind of, that's how we play it, project by project, person by person, as it work goes along.
Okay, so what I believe is they should be asking when they're interviewing. It's something is, how many people, what's the group of people going to be like? Are you working with others?
Sure.
Still?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So you want to learn from people that either have their PhDs or a lot of experience. So that's one segment. But there's also the people that you want to learn from that may have no analytics background at all. But you're going to learn from them. In my current role at Cardlytics, I'm learning from the salespeople more than I'm learning from anybody else, because I can watch them go out. Our group supports the sales team, and so we go out and deliver the analytics, but I get to watch what the sales team does, and I get to see them figure out the solution that the client needs and deliver on that solution, handle the objections that the client has. And they've taught me, coming from 3 jobs of internal consulting, where you go in and you tell them everything you know about the problem, then now when you're going out and talking to clients, one of the things that you have to learn is when to answer the question and when to stop and let the client ask the next question, or let that be the end of that conversation. Instead of trying to prove how smart you are, you're trying to find out what their problems are. So I'm learning more now from the people that aren't the analytics. So you can, I think everybody in here has a good grasp on how to solve a mathematical problem, and you are already in the top, 0.1% of all the people that are out there working. You can do that. What will set you apart over the next 5 to 7 years is how you can translate that into the value proposition for the business. And so learn from people. It won't take long for you to identify the star performers in the company. And if they're not analytics, just find out it's really how they interact with people and how they find the solutions and they deliver on those solutions. So that's what I would recommend. Don't just look for the person with the PhD that might be the smartest in the area. Look for some other people that are doing well.
And know your audience. Having a PhD can be a benefit, or it can also be a label that because somebody has had a bad experience with somebody else, right? You know, it's unfortunate, but people put labels on things. That's just, I don't know, maybe it's human nature. So just be careful with who your audience is. You know, I did some consulting for a while, and you know, the word consultant comes with, you know, some baggage that goes with it too. Not your fault. You could be the best consultant in the whole world, but unfortunately, not everybody is, right? So from that standpoint, if your audience has had an experience with a past person in the company who for a good reason is no longer there, and that person had a PhD and all they were interested in was on solving that really cool, difficult problem, which was really a cool, difficult problem, but at the end of the day, I'm losing money here, and you're trying to get me to solve that problem there, that just wasn't connecting. Now you're the next PhD coming in. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, but that baggage, you know, you're gonna have to carry the weight of that a little bit. So know your audience as best you can. You may not always do that. And there will be some that'll just be thrilled that you have a PhD because now they can actually have the conversation they've been wanting to have because the last guy didn't have one and he didn't know. So I don't know if there's any rule there other than know your audience and just be careful with you know, what you bring to the table.
How important is the cover letter, and what do you look for on the cover letter?
I don't think it's important.
I don't either.
So if I said I don't think it's important, then we would agree on something, and I'm not sure we're supposed to do that. The cover letter, the cover letter would possibly, if your HR department actually passes that through, and a lot of HR departments don't even pass through the cover letter. But the cover letter, if you have made that cover letter to be specific for that role, then I would say it's a good thing. But if it's just a generic cover letter that comes in that says, to whom it may concern, I know that your company needs people like me, and not have anything specific about Cardlytics in there, then that's probably worse than not having a cover letter.
I think it's a great chance to fail.
That's true.
Cover letter. You can misspell something, you can have bad grammar, because you checked with your friend who has bad grammar, and he said it looked fine, and you send it off, and I just think it's a great, what? Well, you know, it's either a negative or a nothing to me, so.
I have enough stuff to read. That's just one more thing to read, and I'm probably going to skim through it. I'm fine with reasonably polite and informal communication is perfectly fine. You can just send me a short email. The shorter it is, the more to the point it is, the more I will probably value it. I know your career centers might be telling you got to do the cover letter, then you got to send the thank you letter. You know, don't worry about it. If you're interviewing with me and you don't send a thank you letter, you're fine. You know, just pop me an email, say thank you. I really enjoyed talking to you. That's good enough. You don't need to do anything. I'm not going to not hire you because you didn't send a thank you letter. Have you ever not hired somebody because they didn't send a thank you letter if they were really good?
I'll tell you what though, one word that I haven't said here, probably the only word I haven't said in a lot of time, is proactive. I really appreciate all the times that I've done interviews is the people that are proactive. Either that night when they thought about something that brought up a neat question, a problem, an issue, hey, maybe you try this, or you went back, you didn't have your computer with you at the time, and you went back to work or to school, and you worked on it for a day. And you said, is this anywhere close to where you're heading with that issue? I mean, that's impressive. It doesn't take much. Maybe it's an Excel toy problem that addresses it. Now, that just kind of proactivity is really impressive to me, and it falls on, so the first few weeks of work, sometimes the real stars, who end up being stars, but I mean, they end up being very proactive the first few weeks of work, and they bring up an idea that you hadn't thought of before, and instead of saying, oh, I'm just a new guy here, I'm not going to bring that, they actually bring it up, or they work out a little toy problem, or they actually work it up pretty nicely in the, you know, whatever the framework is at that company. But that type of new look or an issue or something sets you apart right away. And you know, once you get that first step, it's like kind of making honors in second grade, you know? You maybe only be this little bit smarter than the next person, but you made honors, and now everyone has you tagged as an honors person from then on. It really matters. Becoming a star in the first month really helps, I think. What, honors in second grade?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I've got a rhythm from second grade. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. This is very.